Agriculture, engineering and science is committed to making a difference in our world, from the classroom and laboratory to the field. It provides one of the finest study and research environments on the African continent and is recognized internationally as a center of excellence. Agriculture, Engineering and Science is one of 4 colleges that make up the University of KwaZulu-Natal and is home to over 8,700 students and approximately 700 staff. 3 of the university's 5 campuses form the core of agriculture, engineering and science activities in the region. The college comprises 5 schools: agricultural, earth and environmental sciences, engineering, chemistry and physics, life sciences and mathematics, statistics and computer science. Engineering is offered on the Howard College campus, agriculture on the Pietermaritzburg, and all the other sciences on both the Pietermaritzburg and Westville campuses. Exceptions are agricultural engineering, which is offered in Pietermaritzburg, and geology, which is offered at Westville only. To compete with the best and to meet the challenges of the 21st century, South Africa needs highly skilled professionals in the areas of agriculture, engineering and science. We offer a wide array of interesting and innovative degree programs that open doors to a variety of different careers. Some degrees are unique to UKZN and are not offered at other tertiary institutions. For example, we are the only university in South Africa to offer a fully accredited agricultural engineering degree and one of only 2 universities in the country to offer a BSc in land surveying. Our postgraduate food security training program is the only one in the world, and we have the widest range of agricultural disciplines at any single South African or African campus. The choices of degree and the options on offer may seem confusing at first. Engineering degrees are more specific, and the options are usually career-focused. Emphasis is placed on training in the specific principles which engineers deal with in their professions. Engineering offers different professional specializations. There are also degrees in land surveying or geomatics and science or career focus is a few. There are more general degree on mathematical component. The other option is a BSc LES stream with a focus on the life and environmental sciences with subjects such as geography, genetics, botany, hydrology, zoology, ecology and microbiology. In agriculture, there are various different options that involve practical and scientific applications. Students can combine science subjects with specific agricultural disciplines for a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Agriculture degree. These are more career-orientated. Agriculture and agricultural management are 3-year degrees with a higher practical component. Dietetics is a professional qualification that deals with the role nutrition plays in the promotion of health and the treatment of disease. Most degree programs across the college have field trips and projects that contribute significantly to the curriculum. This ensures that students learn in real-life situations under full field conditions. Many of our lecturers have received Excellence in Teaching awards, are recognized internationally, and are rich in practical experience. Students have access to excellent facilities that rank amongst the best in the world. 300 million rands has recently been invested in new teaching and research facilities, state-of-the-art laboratories, and improved equipment. The 36-hectare research and training farm situated near the Pietermaritzburg campus. This facility provides students with hands-on training and is used extensively as an outdoor laboratory for teaching and research in areas such as animal and poultry science, horticultural science, and agricultural engineering. Adjoining Ukulinga is the Bisley Valley Nature Reserve, which supports a diversity of plant and bird species, as well as some large mammals.
Good evening, students. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome to our Matric Biology Helpline. We know you're writing bright and early tomorrow morning, so I'm sure that this session is going to help you to revise, and we're going to practice some past year questions. My name is Jerusha Naidu and I will be heading the session this evening. Okay, if we have any grade 11s, please may you just put it in the chat as well. My colleagues, Dr. Nimisha Singh, will help you if you do have any queries there. Alternatively, you can email the helpline at livesciencehelpline@ukzn.ac.za. Okay, there will be some information for you in the chat if we do have any grade 11s. Okay, can I get a thumbs up if everybody can hear me? I'm going to start sharing my screen shortly with you. And we will be going, thank you very much. We'll be going through the second half of paper 1. In our first session, for those of you who were not here on Saturday, in our first session, we had gone through we actually first did the responding to the environment, human responses to the environment, and we did endocrine and homeostasis. Okay, so that was the majority of your paper 1, or about half of it. So now we're going to be going through the second half of it, which will be reproduction in humans, reproduction in vertebrates, and plant responses to the environment. Okay, I'm just going to start sharing my screen with you now so we can begin. Okay, can everybody see that? If you can just give me a thumbs up, that will be great. Okay. Thank you very much. If I can just ask everybody to mute your mic, unless you have a question, then you can please feel free to unmute and ask me. You just say, excuse me, miss, I have something to ask. and you can stop me at any point. We're going to be doing revision as we go along. Okay, so if you are unsure of any theory behind some of the questions that we're doing, please feel free to ask me. Okay, if you don't understand anything, you are more than welcome to ask me. I'm not sure if you have the study guide, but I will be making some references to it, or the textbook even. But at this point, I know it's quite late, so everybody should have actually already learned their material, and this is good practice for tomorrow. Okay. Okay, so as I said, we are going to be covering reproduction in humans, which is actually 41 marks of your 150 mark paper. Okay, so it's quite a big chunk. And then reproduction in vertebrates is 13 marks, and plant responses to the environment. Oh, sorry, this is incorrect. It's actually reproduction in vertebrates is actually 8 marks, and your plant responses to the environment is 13 marks. Okay, so you're likely to get one short answer question on reproduction in vertebrates. I would assume probably, I've got an example for you, but I would take a wild guess, and I would think that would be something about the amniotic egg or the types of embryo development. Okay, when it comes to reproduction in vertebrates, it's only for 8 marks. Okay, but I've got an example for you later on in the slides. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. And we're going to go straight into past papers. Now, I've taken these questions from previous past papers as far back as 2016. So we've got from 2016 until 2020 to go through, okay? And that's good practice for you, so you are aware of the types of questions you're going to be asked. And I will give you some tips at the end on studying these particular sections. Okay, if at some point you've got a question regarding any of the other sections, you may put it in the chat as well, or you can save it to the end, and I will, if we have time, I will definitely try and answer that for you. Okay. Okay, so let's start with this question number 1. Okay, and it is about obviously human reproduction, and the first question asks you to identify the label A. So I'm going to ask you guys for the answers, okay, because obviously I know the answers. So I'm going to ask you, so you can just unmute and shout out the answer to me. That'll be perfect. Okay, so can anybody identify label A for me? And don't feel shy. We all in the same boat. It's all your colleagues that are with you here, and this is a learning experience. So don't feel shy at all. We all trying to learn, and it's very good practice for you guys to be able to see whether you really do know the answers, and we're aiming for 90s, yeah, so in tomorrow's paper. So we need to know whether you do know the answers or not. And if you feel at any point, okay, I'm unsure about this section, put a star next to it, or make a little note as we're going to say, okay, I need to actually revise the functions of the membranes in the womb or something like that. Okay, whatever you feel you are but not confident with. Okay, so what's the answer for A? Let's go.
Chorion.
Very good, young lady. Okay, and what can you tell me is the function? I just put here a little note for me to discuss the functions with you. This is a good way to revise. Okay, so they can ask you identify and give a function, or they can, you'll see there's a lot of examples of functions. I said on Saturday as well that in everything in this paper that you're going to be answering, it's always going to be structure and function. Okay, so they're definitely going to ask you something about the function of a structure, or they will ask you to describe the actual structure based on its function. Okay, they can ask you how is something well suited. That would be structure. Then it could ask you if this was damaged, what happens? Then you obviously need to know the function of it in order for you to say what will happen if it is damaged. Okay, so structure and function are key for your paper one. Okay, in every organ that you're learning about, whether it's your human reproduction, whether it's the eye, the ear, the skin, all of that, the brain, everything is structure related to function. Okay, so can anybody quickly tell me what is the function of the chorion?
Enables gaseous exchange.
Okay. What else?
It forms the placenta.
It forms the placenta. It's attached to, it's in contact with the placenta. It does have some contact with the placenta, yes. Okay, so this is an important fetal membrane that you would need to know. What's label number C?
Umbilical cord.
Right, and what's the function of the umbilical cord?
Provide nutrients to the fetus.
Okay, what else can you tell me? Give me about 3 functions of the umbilical cord.
Removes waste product from the fetus.
Very good. What else?
Contains
it's
blood vessels which carry carbon dioxide away from the fetus and oxygen to the fetus.
Yes, basically that is just exactly what we've just said. That's very good. And since it's a cord, it's obviously joining something to something else. So it is actually connecting the fetus to the placenta. Okay, so that's very good. So that means you do know some functions of your structures. Okay, so definitely they're going to ask you some question about the placenta. So sorry, the umbilical cord and the placenta. So while we're here, let's look at, oh, okay, there is, okay, we'll leave the placenta to question 4.4 for now. Okay, so you know the functions of your umbilical cord and your chorion. Okay, let's move on. I'll type in the answers for you as we go so that you can see if you want to jot anything down as we're going along. Okay, right, let's go to the next question. State 2 functions of the fluid in part B. Okay, can I just ask you to mute? Sorry, I don't know why I went on to mute, but can I just ask other people to mute? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Right, so the question was state 2 functions of the fluid in part B. What is the fluid in part B?
Amniotic fluid.
Very good. And what does the amniotic fluid do? It's asking for functions.
Act as a shock absorber.
Very good. Okay, so I've just put the answer for you there so that you could jot it down. It's good revision. Okay, but the amniotic fluid is very important because now it allows the fetus to be protected in a shock absorbing fluid. Okay, that since it's a fluid, it also prevents the fetus from drying out. And since the fetus is suspended in this fluid, it allows free movement of the fetus, and it also prevents drastic temperature changes for the fetus, which is actually very sensitive to these temperature changes. Okay, so it keeps the fetus nice and cozy and warm. Okay, so you must know your functions of the amniotic fluid. That is definitely something that they can ask you. Okay, Then name one system in the baby's body that takes over the function of part D once the baby is born. So let's start with what is the function of part D, which is the what?
Placenta.
Very good. So what are the functions of the placenta? Let's start there. You can give me functions of the placenta. We said it connects to the umbilical cord, which connects it to a blood supply. And obviously that umbilical cord takes away carbon dioxide and transfers oxygen to the fetus. Okay, so we could say that which, since it's joined to the placenta is an organ that actually allows gaseous exchange to occur between the fetus and the mother. Okay, it doesn't only allow gaseous exchange, it also facilitates excretion, because remember, all the baby's waste is coming through the umbilical cord by the placenta to the mother, so she can do the excretion of waste products. And nutrients obviously flows through the umbilical cord to the fetus. So that is all connected to the placenta. So we say that the placenta is now the organ that is conferring that or serving that purpose. Okay, the placenta also produces antibodies that can actually give the fetus passive immunity. So pregnant mothers that have taken the COVID vaccine, a recent study showed that the fetus actually gets some antibodies via passive immunity by the placenta. Okay, so the fetus may be born with a certain amount of passive immunity to COVID-19 for mothers who have taken the COVID vaccine during pregnancy. Okay, the placenta secretes the hormone progesterone. This is important. Okay, there was I came across a multiple choice question that asked which two structures secrete progesterone, and the answer was placenta. And can you just quickly tell me what else secretes progesterone? The corpus callosum. Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Corpus luteum, sorry. Okay, also secretes progesterone. So progesterone maintains pregnancy. It allows that endometrial lining to be maintained and give the allow a very good blood supply to the womb. Okay, so those are the functions of the placenta. So if you had to reduce that placenta, that means you're reducing the functionality of the placenta. What impact is that going to have on the fetus? As we said, the placenta is involved in giving the fetus nutrients and oxygen and taking away waste. So obviously the fetus will now have less nutrients, okay, and will have less oxygen, and less waste will be able to be removed from the fetus. Okay, that's just dealing with the one function, the main function of the placenta. Okay, so the fetus will receive less nutrients. So if a fetus is getting less nutrients, it's going to have a lower birth weight. It won't be as well developed. Okay, the fetus, as we said, will receive less oxygen if that placenta is reduced. So it can also have the same, maybe mental underdevelopment. Okay, then the waste products that's produced by the fetus will actually accumulate, because that placenta is not able to carry away those waste products efficiently because it is reduced. So that will now affect the functioning of the fetus if its own waste products are accumulating in the womb. Okay. Is everybody okay with that question? If you felt uncomfortable with answering that type of a question, then it means you need to revise your your human reproduction section a little bit, okay? These membranes are very important. The structures within the womb are very important. Knowing the structures within the womb in relation to a fetus, okay? Okay, so let's move on to another question. Okay, so this was an excerpt from another paper that was regarding cryptorchidism, okay? And this is a condition that occurs in newborns when one or both of the testes do not descend into the scrotal sac at birth. So one remains inside the abdominal cavity. This condition occurs in approximately 3 to 5% of full-term male infants, while approximately 1/3 of premature male babies are born with this condition. If the testes do not descend naturally by the age of 1, treatment is needed, and that could be in the form of testosterone or surgery. And if this condition is not resolved, it will lead to infertility and an increased risk of testicular cancer. Okay, so now we are answering questions relating to this little excerpt here. Okay, state one function of testosterone not mentioned in the extract. Okay, so we know that testosterone is involved in maturation of the testes, but what's not mentioned here is that testosterone is involved in developing secondary male characteristics, okay, and also in spermatogenesis. Okay, so let's quickly go over the functions of testosterone. What does it do? What is it? Anybody? Hello? Anybody want to tell me the function of testosterone? It's a hormone. Let's start there. What does it do now?
It's responsible for the development of the male characteristics such as growth on hair on face, lowering.
Very good. Okay, so it's involved in male characteristics that you would see, like hair growth, deepening of the voice, making a man more masculine, muscle development. All those are considered secondary male characteristics. Okay, so you should definitely know the functions of testosterone. It can definitely come out in this as a question in this section. Okay, so according to the extract now, state 2 ways in which cryptorchidism is treated. Okay, so if you look at the 3rd paragraph, that's where your answer is going to come from. So let's have an answer. 2 ways in which this condition can be treated. Anybody? It can be treated by administering testosterone and
Surgery.
and
Having
surgery.
Surgery.
Very good. Okay.
That's what we did on that Saturday. We didn't sit long, we had to come to the shop.
Okay. So the next question. What percentage of mature male babies are born with this condition? It says 3 to 5%. Okay.
Isn't it 33,33?
What percentage of premature male babies are born with this
Yeah, it's 1/3.
Condition? Yes, correct. Sorry, I was reading the wrong thing. Yes, you are correct. It will be 33,3 because that's 1/3. Very good. Okay, so from the extract, give one reason other than infertility as to why this condition needs to be treated. If it's not resolved naturally.
It increases the risk
Of what?
of testicular cancer.
Very good. Okay, so you must be specific when you answer it. Okay, you can't just say it increases the risk. We're not sure what risk you're talking about. Okay, so please make sure your answers are very specific. Then you definitely know you're going to get the marks. Okay. Explain why undescended testes may lead to infertility in young males. Okay, so if the testes, if it does not descend into the scrotum, it's contained in the abdominal cavity, which means that it's on the inside of your body. And a very important function of the scrotum is to house the testes outside of the body such that the testes are maintained at a lower temperature than the inside of your body. Okay, because a high temperature is going to affect sperm production. Okay, so the testes will not only be exposed to a higher temperature within the body, that will cause him to function incorrectly or function abnormally. Okay, so you'll also have poor blood circulation and increased pressure on the testes, because remember, there's a whole lot of other organs inside the abdominal cavity, and the testes is not supposed to be there. So it's going to be smashed with other internal organs, okay, which is going to be putting pressure on that organ. Okay, if this is the case, then that means it's going to impact sperm or spermatogenesis, okay, the production of sperm. You may have abnormal sperm or a very low sperm count. It means that you won't produce as much sperm. Okay, so it's very, it has some serious consequences if the testes have not descended into the scrotal sac. Okay, and that you can see was a question out of 7 marks. So if you have a whole lot of these shorter questions, you're going to get to your 41 marks. You guys are very lucky not to have an essay type question, so you can really score your marks with source-based and these short answer questions. Okay, and I did notice that there's much fewer long answer questions in the human reproduction section compared to the human responses to the environment section. That had much longer questions out of 4 and 5. These were mainly out of 1 to 3 marks. Okay, so please try and score your marks as much as possible in this section. Okay, let's move on. Okay, here's a question from 2019, easy one. Let's identify part A. Anybody can identify part A for me?
It's a jelly-like layer.
Very good. And what is this jelly-like layer? What's it made up of? Anybody? It's actually a protein coat. And can you tell me the function of this jelly-like layer?
To prevent dehydration.
Okay, that could be true because it's gelatinous, but mostly it's made up of proteins. So it's actually for protection of that ovum. Remember, it's protecting that DNA that's inside there. Okay, so the jelly-like layer is for protection, and it also allows hydrolytic enzymes from the sperm to digest a pathway into the egg. Okay, so if you look here at part C, there's that gray colored area that is called the acrosome, and that is your answer to question 1.4.1c. The label for that is the acrosome, and it actually contains enzymes that will break down this jelly-like layer such that the genetic material that is housed at D can now enter the ovum and join with that nucleus that's inside the ovum. So we have genetic material from the sperm and genetic material from the egg. Okay. What is the label for part B?
Cytoplasm.
Yes, that's the cytoplasm of the ovum. Okay. And you'll find your genetic material in that. Okay. 1.4.2, name the process involving meiosis that leads to the formation of an ovum.
Oogenesis. I'm not sure.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Okay, it is the actual making of an egg. It's called oogenesis. Okay, next question. Write down only the letter of the part of the sperm that enters the ovum.
Let's see.
Okay, so does that part enter the ovum?
It's D.
Yes, that is correct, because that is your genetic information. Okay, so your genetic information or your nucleus containing DNA from the sperm is going to now go into the ovum and connect with, mix with the genetic material that is already in the ovum. Okay, then 1.4.4, write down only the letters of two parts that enable the sperm to move towards the ovum.
F and E.
E and F.
F, yeah, and what's your other one?
And E.
E.
Okay, why?
E contains mitochondria.
So what does that mean?
It supplies energy for it to swim.
Very good. See how I want that full
Thank you.
answer. D is is a part of the sperm that contains a lot of mitochondria, which provide energy for the sperm to move towards the egg, to swim all the way up the vaginal canal, all the way up to find the ovum in the fallopian tube. Okay, so the mitochondria provide the energy for motility. Then what is F?
It's the tail.
Tail.
Okay, what does that do?
It helps for swimming.
Very good. Okay, so the tail is involved in swimming up the vaginal canal to get into the fallopian tube and meet with an ovum. Okay, very good. Okay, let's move on. Now, this is an example of a question regarding reproduction in vertebrates. Okay, so they've given you a table there about the composition of an egg in 3 different bird species. Okay, and they ask you firstly to define ovovivipary. Please, these definitions you must know. So ovovivipary is when there's development of a fertilized egg within the mother's body. Okay, and the developing young obtains that nutrients and whatever it needs from the actual yolk of the egg, but it happens within the mother's body. Then the young hatch out of that egg, okay, still in the mother's body, and then are born. Okay, so ovovivipary occurs in some insects, fish, some reptiles. Okay, It's quite common in invertebrates. Okay, so eggs are retained and they hatch inside the female body, and live young are born. But you need to remember there's an egg involved that has a yolk. Okay, so ovovivipary. Okay, then which one of the bird species, 1, 2, or 3, so now we're reading from that table that they've given, is most probably shows a precocial development reproductive strategy? Okay, so let's talk about what is precocial development. Can anybody tell me?
In precocial development, the hatchlings are quite well developed when they hatch.
Okay, correct. But why are they quite well developed? How come they're quite well developed when they hatch?
The incubation time is usually longer so that the young can fully develop.
Okay, that's very good. And while this young is developing, while there's that incubation time, how is that embryo getting nutrients?
The eggs have a large amount of yolk.
Very good. That's what I want
for developing the embryo.
Very good. That is the key that I want to hear. So in precocial development, the key is that the young chicks are actually well developed within the egg. And so they hatch, when they do hatch, they actually very well developed and they can survive sort of on their own. And they've grown inside that egg, because that egg contains a very large amount of yolk, which means a large amount of nutrients. Okay, and as you said, there's a slightly longer gestational period. Okay, so which one of the bird species is most probably shows precocial development?
So,
and why would you say that?
Because it has the highest yolk percentage.
Very good. Okay, it has the highest yolk percentage. So it means it's got the highest amount of nutrients. Okay, explain your answer. That would be it. Okay, I just wrote there, the egg has the highest yolk or energy content that will allow maximum development before hatching. Okay, and while we're at it, let's quickly talk about altricial development. And what's the difference between the precocial development and the altricial development? Anybody? They can easily ask you to tabulate a difference or two. So where would you find this type of development? In birds that actually lay their eggs up in trees, because their eggs have small yolks. Okay, which means that their little chick is going to be, excuse me, going to be poorly developed when it hatches. So the bird has to perch its nest quite high to protect those very vulnerable hatchlings. Okay, because they are so underdeveloped. They rely completely on the parent for food and protection. Okay, so that is the difference between precocial and altricial development. So you'll find your precocial development occurs mostly in land birds like ostriches, ducks, turkeys. Okay, but altricial development occurs mostly in birds that fly quite high. So like eagles, doves, swallows. Okay, those big birds of prey, they can perch their nests quite high. Okay, so which one of the bird species will possibly produce offspring requiring the highest degree of parental care?
1.
The first one.
Is 1.
And why is that?
It has the smallest yolk percentage.
And
Very
less
good.
energy.
And
Less energy. Okay, so it's going to have to rely on its parents to give it the most amount of care, to give it food and protection. Okay, very good. You answered that question quite well. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's look at this question here. This is a bit more intense. Okay, these questions were out of 3 and 4 marks. Okay, and it has to do with hormones. Okay, so if you look at the graph, this was from 2019 paper. They've given you a graph of progesterone over time. Okay, and it is based on somebody taking an oral contraceptive. So it's with pills, and somebody who's not taking an oral contraceptive, which is without pills. Okay, so what can you see? Just a reading of the graph, please. You must be able to read off a graph. You're reading from left to right, and you're always looking at an independent and dependent variable. Okay, so your time is what kind of a variable? Your independent variable, and progesterone is dependent on that time, so it is your dependent variable. Okay, so you're looking at the amount of progesterone over time in people that are taking oral contraceptives and people who are not taking oral contraceptives. Okay, so that is a summary of what that graph actually says. So you should be able to read off this graph or understand what the graph is showing. You're definitely going to get a graph of some sort in this paper. Okay, you may get several actually. Okay, so the estrogen levels between days 8 and 22 will remain low in the woman who takes contraceptive pills. Explain why this is the case. Okay, so from 8, so down here, so from 8 to 22, you have estrogen levels that are low. So it's not what we're looking at in the graph exactly, but you need to know that when somebody is taking an oral contraceptive, their estrogen levels are going to be low for most of their cycle actually. Okay, so explain why that is the case. What is an oral contraceptive? What does it do? Anybody want to let me know? Or answer? Just try. You can just try and we'll all chip in. So it's talking about the estrogen levels. So what happens in a normal cycle with estrogen levels? Between days 8 and 22, let's say actually between days 8 and 14, you're going to have a surge in a normal person. Okay, you're going to have a surge in estrogen levels. Why is that? Because there's ovulation that's going to take place. Okay, but for women who are taking oral contraceptive pills, that actually does not occur because those oral contraceptive pills contain progesterone. Okay, and if you have progesterone, if you're taking progesterone, it's going to suppress the estrogen level production, the level of estrogen production. Okay, so the high levels of progesterone in the pills will actually inhibit the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland, which usually happens around day 8 to 22, because that is when you ovulate. So follicle stimulating hormone obviously stimulates a follicle, so that is stimulating an egg to be formed. Okay, and so if progesterone is going to inhibit that, it means you are not going to develop a follicle. You're not going to ovulate. Okay. Hence, no estrogen will be secreted in that time because the progesterone has a counteractive effect on the estrogen, okay, via follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so those three hormones actually work in a very close relationship: follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. Okay, when your estrogen levels are high, your progesterone levels will be low because your follicle stimulating hormone levels will also be low. Okay, hope that is clear. Then ovulation took place on day 14 in the woman not taking contraceptive pills. Okay, so that's normal. Explain the evidence in the graph that supports this conclusion. So what can we see happens on day 14? There's a giant spike here in progesterone. Okay, so a giant spike in progesterone means that the Graafian follicle became the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is what secretes your progesterone. That is why there is a large spike in progesterone levels. Okay. Is everybody with me? Are you okay? You're very quiet. Are you putting questions on the chat? Okay.
May you please explain the rising of progesterone if it's not a problem?
Sure, young lady. Okay, so it's for this question, right? So the increase in progesterone levels is occurring because the Graafian follicle, remember in oogenesis, you have your ovarian follicle, then it develops into your Graafian follicle. Then at a certain point, your luteinizing hormone is going to make this follicle swell, and eventually that will burst, and that is your process of ovulation. Okay, that ovum is released into the fallopian tube. It carries on its job, but what's left is that empty Graafian follicle, and that Graafian follicle now develops into a corpus luteum, and that corpus luteum actually secretes the hormone progesterone. Okay, so if that egg has been fertilized, the progesterone comes in handy because progesterone maintains pregnancy. Okay, so if that egg got fertilized by sperm, it will travel to the womb and embed itself in the endometrial lining, and progesterone that is secreted by the corpus luteum will maintain that pregnancy. So the fact that this graph shows that on day 14 there was a large increase in progesterone levels indicates that that corpus luteum has actually formed and is secreting that hormone. Okay. There's only two things that's going to secrete your progesterone. It's the placenta and the corpus luteum. Okay. Is that okay? Do you understand that?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Suggest one reason for including pills with no hormones in the contraceptive pill packet. Okay, so the contraceptive pill packet has a whole lot of pills for 28-day cycle that have the hormone estradiol in it, and then there's another 7-day part, which is a different color tablet that actually does not have any hormones. But why do they include that? Because they want the woman to be consistent in taking a tablet at a certain time every single day, whether it's one that contains a hormone or not. Okay, now once that woman is actually on the pills that do not have any hormones, she will get her period, because that is actually tricking the body into thinking that or triggering the body into a cycle of some sort, but it's actually called withdrawal bleeding. Okay, so the woman will stay in the habit of taking that pill and not forget to take the progesterone containing pills. That's for the other 21 days. Okay, so those blank tablets are actually just to maintain a habit. Okay. Then describe the development of a zygote.
Sorry, miss.
Do you have a question?
In
Yes.
2.4.2,
Yeah.
what is the hormone that has been secreted by the corpus luteum?
The hormone that's being secreted by the corpus luteum is progesterone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so remember the placenta and the corpus luteum secrete your progesterone.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, describe the development of a zygote until implantation occurs for 4 marks. Okay, so development of a zygote until implantation occurs. Okay, and that is now once your egg has been fertilized. Okay, so at days, we sort of call it at day 0, you're getting fertilization occurring. Okay, and then now that will actually kick off your zygote development. Okay, so a few days after fertilization, like 1 or 2 days, you're going to get a zygote dividing by mitosis to form a small ball of cells, and it will keep dividing until about the 5th day. And once you have this small ball of cells, it is called a morula, M-O-R-U-L-A. Okay, a few days later, still mitosis is occurring, which means that cells are dividing and they are maintaining the same number of chromosomes. Okay, and the cells are identical to each other. They dividing by mitosis. So that ball of cells is going to just get bigger. Okay, and it's going to form a hollow ball of cells called the blastula. Okay, and then that blastula is going to move into the womb, and a blastocyst is going to embed itself in the endometrial lining within the womb. Okay, so that is your implantation. Okay, so it's going from fertilization to the zygote dividing by mitosis to form a morula, which continues to divide by mitosis to form a blastula or blastocyst, and that is what implants in the endometrial lining in the womb. Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, let's move on. This is a sort of related question, also sort of easy, I think. And if you get something like this, make sure that you get all the possible marks, okay? Okay, so identify part A. Okay, we already did this. Yes, young lady, what did you say?
Acrosome.
Okay, very good. What's the function? Just remind me of the function, please.
It contains enzymes.
What do the enzymes do?
The
They
enzymes.
digest the wall of the egg cell for fertilization.
And what is that wall?
The jelly-like layer.
Very good. Okay, that was a quick recap of what we just did. Okay, so part A is the acrosome. Name the organelle found in large numbers in part C.
Mitochondria.
Very good. Give the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 only from the diagram which represents the morula. What's the morula, as we just spoke about now? from numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4, which one is the morula?
1.
And what's number 3 then?
3, the morula.
Very good, young man. Number 3 is the morula because that, remember, okay, so if you just compare numbers 1 and 3, this has a lot more cells. So it's actually more likely to be the blastocyst because the morula is closer to when fertilization occurred. So it has less cells. Okay, so remember, fertilization occurs, then it divides by mitosis to form the morula, and then it further divides by mitosis to form the blastocyst. So the blastocyst has more cells than the morula. Okay, so the smaller one is going to be your morula, which is number 3. Okay, so what is the structure that will implant in the uterus?
2.
What is number 2 there? Number 2 is actually the ovum. If we go back here to this picture, see there's the ovum. It's just got that protein jelly-like layer and then your nucleus with the genetic material. Okay, so that is your ovum. And obviously this is the sperm. That's easy to identify. So we can see number 4 is the sperm. Number 2 is the ovum because you can just see a jelly-like layer and then inside the nucleus there with genetic information, genetic material. So this is the ovum. So we've got ovum, morula, and sperm. So what's this? Number 1. The blastula or blastocyst. Okay, so now that we've identified these things, which structure, which of the 4 structure implants itself in the uterus? It can't be number 1. It is number 1, which is the blastula or the blastocyst. Okay, and then it asks you to identify which one of this is one of these are the blastula, and that is number 1.
Number 1 again.
Very good. Okay, now give the letter and name of the part that will enter the ovum during fertilization. Letter and name. So this is going to be out of 2 marks.
B.
B, nucleus.
Very good. That is correct. Okay. So you're going to give the letter and the name. So make sure you do that. Don't just say nucleus or B. Okay. Must make sure you get your full 2 marks there. Then name the type of cell division that occurred to produce the structure in diagram 3. And we just spoke about this now. What type of division is going to occur to give us a morula from a fertilized ovum? What type of division? There's only 2 types.
Mitosis?
Isn't it mitosis?
Yes, that is correct. So mitosis is the type of cell division. Okay. When we are going from a ovum to a morula and from a morula to a blastocyst. Is everybody with me? Any questions?
No questions, miss.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We're doing a lot of reproduction questions because that's the biggest topic. That's for 41 marks. Okay, so you may get a whole lot of these in the paper. And you'll also get in your multiple choice and matching and definitions. You know, those in the beginning of your paper, you'll have in section A, you're going to have multiple choice, you're going to have matching, and you're going to have give the biological term for something. Okay, so please, you must know your definitions. Okay, so 3.1.1, identify part D. This was from 2020's paper. Identify part D.
Cervix.
Very good. Okay, that's your cervix. State one function of part A, the fallopian tube. Oh, sorry, I mistakenly just gave you that answer. What that is the fallopian tube. So now tell me one function of that.
Fertilization.
The site of
Fertilization.
fertilization.
That is where fertilization usually occurs. And it's also a conduit for that ovum to travel into the womb. Okay. A pathway for that ovum to travel into the womb. Okay. Describe the process of oogenesis as it occurs in part B. So what is part B?
The ovary.
The
Yes.
ovary.
Okay, so how does oogenesis occur? It's basically done in 3 sort of steps. Okay, you've got the ovaries that produce your ova. Okay, and then what happens is the ova are diploid cells. Okay, those diploid cells in the ovary now have to undergo, well, they undergo mitosis initially in order to have many ova. You're born, girls are born with a certain number of ova. Okay, then in order for it to actually become an ovum that will now join with a sperm cell, it has to undergo meiosis. Okay, that will now form a follicle. That follicle has half the number of chromosomes than the ova. Okay, because it underwent meiosis. This whole process here occurs under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so that it's in the name, it sort of tells you what it does in the name, follicle stimulating hormone. So it's stimulating the production of a follicle. Okay, so one cell undergoes this meiosis and it forms a haploid ovum. Okay, so that will be where you're getting your 4 marks from, saying diploid cells in the ovary undergo mitosis, then they form numerous follicles under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. One cell undergoes meiosis and that forms a haploid ovum. Then if we just take it one step further, that ovum under the influence of luteinizing hormone will now swell and develop into a Graafian follicle, which will actually burst, and that is your process of ovulation. Once that Graafian follicle has burst and released that ovum into the fallopian tubes, that Graafian follicle becomes a corpus luteum, and that corpus luteum is going to secrete your progesterone, which maintains pregnancy, and the Graafian follicle will secrete your estrogen. Okay, so that was just an overview of oogenesis and the ovarian cycle. Okay, ovarian cycle is the process whereby that ovum, process of ovulation, and where that Graafian follicle changes to a corpus luteum. Okay. State one way in which structure C is suited to its function during pregnancy. Okay, so we're always going to have a question on structure and function. Everything is about structure and function. Okay, so state one way in which structure C is suited for its function during pregnancy. What is structure C?
Endometrium.
Uterus.
Okay. Correct, but I think it's more referring to the actual uterus. I think if the line extends more to this inner lining here, then you could talk about the endometrial lining or the endometrium. But it seems to be pointing more just to the uterus itself. Okay, so the uterus is actually, how is the uterus well suited to its function?
It's where the fetus grows.
It's
where the fetus develops.
Okay, so now, okay, so think about what I'm asking now. I'm asking how is this uterus well suited to its function, but you've told me what it does. You've told me it's a place where the fetus grows, which is correct, but it's not answering the question. The question is, how is it well suited? So it means you need to give me a structural feature of the uterus to tell me how it actually is going to make that fetus grow. How is it well suited to allowing that fetus to grow inside of it?
It's usually
It
small
protects
in
the
size, but
developing.
enlarges during pregnancy.
It enlarges.
It protects the developing embryo.
See, okay, let me stop you there. The question is, how is it going to do that? Because it's saying, let me read the question again. State one way in which structure C is suited for its function. This word is very important here. Suited. It means what structural feature enables it to, as you said, allow that fetus to grow inside there. That is a function. That's the function now. The function is it must house the fetus and allow it to grow, and it will expand when it does that. That is correct. But what structural feature? What is it made of? How is it adapted? How is it adapted to perform that function?
The lining of the uterus, the endometrium, is richly supplied with blood vessels.
For what?
It serves for attachment of the embryo if fertilization takes place.
Okay, so the uterus has that endometrium lining, correct? But you've told me now how the endometrium is well suited to its function. But what's the structural adaptability of the uterus itself?
Structure C, uterus with muscular walls.
Very good. Girls, you should be embarrassed. There's a guy answering this question.
Oh, what that's supposed to mean?
Okay, and he's the only one who got it correct. Yes, young man, that is absolutely correct. The uterus is a muscular structure. That is what I want to hear. The fact that you're telling me the actual structure of the uterus. It is muscular. Okay, so that muscular structure allows that fetus to grow inside because it protects the fetus and allows development of the expanding fetus, because it's muscular, those muscles can expand and stretch to accommodate that growing fetus. Is everybody with me? Do you understand how this question needs to be answered? It's saying,
yes.
It's asking you for the structure. It's asking you how is it well suited. Okay, so please learn from that. So you must be able to know how something is structured, and its structure will enable it to perform its function. Okay, don't mistakenly say its function now, because that's not what the question is asking. Okay, so let's move on. Okay. Now, a person undergoes a surgical operation to remove part B. So they have removed their ovaries, okay, on both sides. Explain why this person will not menstruate. Okay, so part B is your ovary, okay? And if the ovary is not there, what's the function of the ovary now? This is how they can phrase the question. They're asking you the function of the ovary in a backwards way. Okay, so you need to know the function of the ovary in order to answer the question of what happens if that ovary is not there. Okay, so you have to start with the function of the ovary. So the function of the ovary is to produce an ovum, okay, and a follicle. Okay, so if there's no ovary, that means there's no follicle that's going to develop. There's no egg that's going to be developing there, which means that the ovarian cycle cannot take place. So there cannot be any estrogen production from the Graafian follicle. There will be no progesterone production from the corpus luteum because there is no ovulation taking place. Okay, if there's no ovaries. Consequently, it means that the endometrium will not develop, because remember that progesterone secreted from the corpus luteum is what actually causes that endometrial lining to thicken. Okay, and that endometrium will not get thick if there's no progesterone produced by the corpus luteum to make it such. Okay, so if this endometrium is not going to develop, then it means it's obviously not going to be shed during menstruation. Okay, so when menstruation occurs, this lining is actually what's ripping off your uterus and comes out the cervix and vaginal canal. Okay, so if there's no ovaries, there's no follicle, there's no progesterone and estrogen, and therefore there's no thickening of the lining, which means there's going to be no menstruation. Okay, so you must also follow this logical explanation. You must go from or take a excuse me, a logical flow, a logical approach to your answer. You're going from one thing, therefore this happens, therefore that happens, therefore that happens. Okay, so it must be very logical. Your answers, if your answers are logical, then you're going to get your marks. Okay. Okay, is everybody with me so far on that? Is everybody understanding?
Yes, Miss.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, fantastic. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so here's an excerpt from last year's paper as well. Male hormone contraceptive pills have been developed for over 50 years. The pills contain a substance called TU, which inhibits the secretion of testosterone. There is, however, no product available on the market yet, mainly due to many side effects associated with the product. An investigation was done to determine how TU affects male fertility. The procedure was as follows. 308 male volunteers were selected. A sperm count for each volunteer was done initially, which means at the start, and each volunteer was given 500 milligrams of TU monthly over a period of 12 months. During the period of investigation, the volunteers were asked to wear loose-fitting trousers and underwear made of the same light fabric. Okay, so something loose. A sperm count was done weekly over a period of 24 months, which is 2 years. The average sperm count was calculated per volunteer. Okay, so they've given you a little note. Sperm count refers to the total number of healthy sperm per milliliter of semen and is an indication of male fertility. Okay, seems pretty straightforward, this little investigation. Identify the dependent variable in the investigation. Let's have an answer. What's the dependent variable? What are we measuring?
How TU affects male fertility.
Sorry?
How TU affects male fertility.
Okay, that is sort of your aim, but what's the actual variable, the dependent variable? You did say it, that what you said was correct, but from your sentence, which one is the dependent variable? Is the thing we're measuring. So we are measuring male fertility. Okay, very good.
Okay.
We are measuring male fertility by the sperm count. Okay, so that is the next question. State how the dependent variable was measured. It was measured by the average sperm count per volunteer over a period of 24, weekly over a period of 24 months. Okay, that is a full answer to that question. Okay, is everybody following that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Name 2 other factors that should be considered when selecting volunteers. So in this experiment, they just say 308 healthy male volunteers were selected. That's very vague. So name 2 other factors that should be considered when selecting volunteers. Remember now, this is going to be something that is going to affect your experiment, because if you obviously you have to take males, and the next thing is they have to have certain characteristics that are the same, such that the variability amongst your volunteers do not turn into confounding factors that can actually affect your experiment. So think about that when you are naming 2 other factors that should be considered, because you want to keep all confounding factors controlled. Okay, things that can affect your experiment negatively in some way, that a factor that can cause your results to be unreliable. So you want to control that. So name 2 other factors that you should consider when selecting these volunteers. They should all be sorry?
Their age.
Very good. They should all be the same age, because remember, the sperm count of a young person is not the same as the sperm count of an old person. Okay, so that is a confounding factor that you should control. So age, you should consider the age of the volunteers. Yes, next, what else?
And their health.
Okay, be more specific with the health, because it clearly says 308 healthy male volunteers. So we know they're all healthy, but what's that? I mean, that could mean anything.
They should all be following the same diet.
Very good. Correct. Because certain foods obviously and promote testosterone production, or have other sort of effects. Okay, very good. What else can you tell me about healthiness? If they are healthy, it means they could be exercising. Okay, and all the volunteers should exercise to the same extent. You can't have somebody who sits in front of the TV the whole day and is completely immobile, having a sperm count and being compared to somebody who runs marathons. Okay, those are 2 different lifestyles. They may both be healthy, but there are different degrees of healthiness. You know what I'm saying? So, and also increased exercise actually promotes testosterone production. Okay, so in that person who's running will actually in real life have a higher sperm count. Okay, so level of fitness or lifestyle needs to be considered. What else? Come. Think of other,
would it be
other
too
things.
far-fetched if you'd mentioned the pants material, because some boys wear tighter pants?
Okay, so they've already told you that they have kept that constant. So that would not be something that you would use when selecting volunteers. Okay, so check the question here. It's only referring to this part here. 308 healthy male volunteers were selected. Those people who were selected were already told about the loose fitting clothes. So don't jump so far ahead with that one. Okay, so think about, this is now at the start of the experiment before you do anything. Who's going to be your actual participants? You want to have people that are the same age, have the same lifestyle. What else? They eat the same diet, as we said.
Drugs.
Anything else? Maybe the same weight. Okay, so things like this, things that can affect your experiment, you need to actually control so that your results are more reliable. Okay, explain how TU reduces fertility. Explain how TU reduces fertility. So the whole point of this male contraceptive was to inhibit the secretion of testosterone. Okay, so if you inhibit testosterone, obviously you're going to inhibit proper spermatogenesis. Those sperm cells are not going to mature. Okay, so you're reducing fertility in that way. Okay, testosterone is essential for spermatogenesis. Okay. Then explain why wearing tight-fitting trousers will decrease male fertility. So remember when we were talking about the scrotum and all of that, we were talking about the testes being outside of the body so that it can maintain a much lower temperature than the body. Okay, so wearing tight-fitting clothes is something that will actually affect your scrotum and your testes, which produce the sperm. Okay, tight-fitting trousers actually decrease male fertility because if something is tight-fitting, it's going to actually squash that organ, and also it will keep that organ too warm. Okay, so loose-fitting clothes actually allow air circulation, which decreases the temperature, and if the temperature is at a certain or an optimal level, then obviously a sperm can be produced efficiently. But if somebody is wearing tight underwear, you like smashing those testes, and you are increasing the temperature of them because that fabric is keeping the testes warm. It can get too warm. Okay, so temperature and the effect of that on normal sperm formation. Okay, so suggest one reason for doing sperm count for an additional 12 months after stopping this treatment. And it's also something, this is a question that you can't get from reading this, but it's from you thinking about the experiment in a critical way. So you will definitely get a question where you have to think a bit outside of the box. Okay, so why would they do this experiment? Why would they run this experiment for an extra year after stopping this TU administration? Because they want to now see the effects of the real effects of TU and whether the body was able to come back to normal or not. Did TU have lasting effects? Or did the body normalize, and did testosterone levels normalize after stopping TU treatment? And the reason it's 12 months is because the initial period of the study was 12 months. So they've just done another year of not having TU in those people's system. Okay. Okay, the contraceptive options that are currently available for men are limited to condoms and vasectomy. Vasectomy involves the cutting and tying of both the vas deferences. Explain how a vasectomy prevents pregnancy. Okay, so what is the vas deferens? Basically, it's asking you what is the function of the vas deferens, so that if you know the function of the vas deferens, you will know what happens if you cut them and tie them and stop their function, basically. So what is the function of the vas deferens? Anybody?
The vas deferens carries sperms from epididymis to the urethra.
Okay, so it's a duct, it's like a sperm duct that propels the sperm to the urethra, okay, with all the other fluids that's contained to make semen, okay? So it propels it into the urethra, okay? So it's like a channel or a duct. So if you cut that duct and you stop it, you tie it, and it cannot be, it cannot transport, or it cannot allow any sperm into the urethra, it means that obviously sperm cannot go into the vaginal canal and be ejaculated into the vaginal canal. So it will not allow pregnancy to occur, because the pregnancy can only occur if a sperm cell has to go through the vagina, through the womb, and go find a little ovum there by the ovary in the fallopian tube. Okay, so there needs to be some sort of channel that will actually allow the sperm to travel from inside of the male body outside and into another person. Okay, so the vas deferens is a duct. Okay, so that vasectomy prevents pregnancy because the sperm cannot actually travel to the urethra at all. It cannot actually exit the body. Okay, so no sperm can be transported from the epididymis to the urethra, and obviously that means semen also, well, only semen can be released. Okay, because the semen will contain the fluids to support the sperm when it's outside of the body, but the actual sperm production from the testes cannot actually reach that urethra because it has to go via the vas deferens. Okay, so the vas deferens goes from the testes to the urethra. So if you tie that up, you won't be able to transport your sperm. Okay. Okay. So that should be fine. That's pretty understandable. So from this question, you can easily get a question about male reproductive concepts and female reproductive concepts. So I've done a good overall spread of that in this revision session. So you can see what kind of questions they can ask you on the male aspects and what kind of questions they can ask you, for example, here on the female aspects. Okay, and it's likely that you will get both of these. Okay, so make sure that you learn that pretty well. Okay, so now we're moving on to very quickly the next small section of your paper, which is going to be the plant responses to the environment. Okay, it's out of 13 marks, and it's very simple for you to learn this section. You just need to learn about plant hormones. And can you just quickly throw me some plant hormone names? What do you know about plant hormones and their names and what they do?
Auxins.
Yes, very good. What else? What else?
Gibberellins.
Very good. What else?
Abscisic acid.
Very good. Okay, so those are some of the plant hormones. You need to know where they are produced and what they do. Okay, you must know the functions of these plant hormones. Okay, the most common one you definitely have to know is going to be your auxins, obviously. Okay, so you're definitely going to get a question on auxins. So you must know where it is produced and what it does in the plant. Okay, what it does in the stem and what it does in the root. Okay, so in the stem, it is obviously going to promote cell division and elongation, and in the root, it's going to inhibit cell division and elongation. Okay, so you must know these plant hormones and their functions. Okay, so this diagram shows you the germinating seed, the radicle, and the plumule, which are exposed to uniform light rays from all directions. Okay, so now the question is asking you define tropism. Also a very important concept you will definitely get asked on. Okay, can anybody quickly tell me what is tropism?
Growth response by parts of a plant due to external stimuli.
Very good. Okay, so it is the plant responding to an external stimulus. It's going to grow in a certain way based on that external stimulus. Okay. Now, this question asks you to draw a labeled diagram to show the position of the radicle and plumule in the seedling 1 week later. Okay, so you need to know that what happens to the radicle, what happens to the plumule. Okay, so what happens to the root, what happens to the stem? Can anybody tell me? Your root is going to grow which way?
Downwards.
Very good. And your stem is going to grow upwards. Okay, so that's what's going to happen a week later. It's very straightforward, but you just need to now draw that. So you can just draw the stem. You can use a similar diagram and draw the stem, draw the stem going down, root going down, and this stem coming up. Okay. And remember, when you're doing a biological drawing, there must be no coloring in. Don't forget your label lines. Don't forget to say figure 1, colon, and this must be underneath your diagram, drawing of a germinating seed after 1 week of growth. Okay, don't forget your figure title at the bottom and your label lines, maybe magnification as well, and maybe some annotations, okay, which are these little things here in brackets, which usually actually tell you about the function of that part, that label. Okay. Okay, so now auxins influence the growth of stems. And auxins influence the growth of stems and roots. State where auxins are produced in the plant. See, they're definitely going to ask you that.
Apical meristem.
Okay, they grow at the tip. Okay, so they grow at all growing points of the stems. Correct? That's, for example, the apical meristem. Okay, where there's meristematic tissue, which causes growth to occur. So where there's lots of dividing cells. Okay. Then describe the effect of auxins on a plant stem that is exposed to unilateral light. What does unilateral mean? It means it's coming from one direction. Okay, so this plant stem is exposed to light coming from the right hand side, for example. Okay, it's different from uniform light from all directions. That is not the same thing. Uniform light from all directions can be like on a sunny day, you just put your plant outside and obviously it's getting light from everywhere. But unilateral light means that it is getting light only from one direction. Okay, so now how does that affect the growth of the plant? Okay, it's asking you to describe that growth of the plant in relation to the effect of auxin. So what does auxin do? As we said in the beginning, auxin is going to, in a stem, it's going to promote cell division and cell elongation. Okay, but in the stem, the auxin is going to actually accumulate on the darker side of the stem. So if the light is coming from the left hand side, the auxin is going to accumulate on the right hand side. It will accumulate on the dark part of the stem. Because it's accumulating on the dark part of the stem, you've got a high concentration of auxin on the left hand side. And what does auxin do? It actually promotes cell division and cell elongation. So the left hand side is going to grow. The left-hand side is going to elongate. And when it elongates, if only one side of that stem is elongating, it actually causes that whole stem to sort of bend. It's growing and bending, okay? And it's bending towards the light because the left-hand side is only growing, because that is where the auxins are accumulated. Okay, so the stem will grow or bend towards the light because stems are positively what? What's the word? What's the word here? What type of tropism? Positively phototropic. Very good. Very good. Okay, so it is going to bend towards the light. Okay, so is everybody fine with that? You understand? They're definitely going to ask you a question about that. Okay. Let's move on quickly. Here's a oh, I should have just used this diagram, sorry. So let me just explain that again. If you look at A, the light is coming this way, coming from the right-hand side. Your auxin is going to accumulate here on the left-hand side of this plant because of the stem, because that is the dark side. So auxin accumulates on the dark side, and the way it is accumulating, it's going to cause cell growth and elongation. And because that part is growing, it actually grows, and it's actually bending it towards the light. Okay, so that's what I was trying to explain to you. Okay, so let's look at this question now. This is another one of the same sort from a different year paper. Name the group of plant hormones that is responsible for the growth responses observed in the diagram. Obviously, we are talking about
auxins.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so name the external stimulus at A. What is the external stimulus at A?
Light.
Phototropism.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay, so the external stimulus is not phototropism. The external stimulus is light. But the plant will respond positively, in a positively phototropic manner to the light. The actual stimulus is the light. Okay, you got that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, then what is the stimulus at D?
Gravity.
Gravity.
Yes, okay. So roots are positively what? What do we say in response to gravity?
Geotropical.
Geotropic. Okay, so roots are positively geotropic because it's growing towards gravity, in the same direction as gravity. Okay, then give one observable reason why plant organ B is a stem. Just based on this, why do you think this is a stem? Anybody? Nobody knows why B is a stem. We said it is positively phototropic. So stems are positively phototropic. A root is not going to be positively phototropic. Roots don't grow up in the air. They grow downwards. So roots are positively geotropic. They grow in the same direction as gravity. Stems grow in the same direction as the sun. Think of it that way. It's going to grow upwards towards the light. Okay, so because this B is growing up towards the stimulus of light, that's how we know it is a stem. Okay, explain the growth response observed in plant organ C. Okay, so that was exactly what we just explained now, that the growth response is to gravity. So this is a root that is positively geotropic because it is growing in the same direction as gravity. Okay, so that is the growth response of plant organ C in response to gravity. If you want me to write that here, I can do that. Okay, is everybody okay with this? Let's do our last question very quickly so that we can take some questions at the end. Okay, so this was from last year's paper as well, an investigation where they have two pots of the same plant, and the same plant, it was the same age and same species, and what they did was they cut the apical buds at the same length, and they put some petroleum jelly on the top of one apical bud, and then they put some agar jelly on the top of the other stem in pot plant 2. Okay, and then they actually observed it for 2 weeks. Okay, then these plants were under the same environmental conditions for 2 weeks. Okay, so the growth of both plants were observed at the end of this period. What's important to note was that the cut apical bud of pot plant 2 was placed on a block of agar jelly for 2 hours. Okay, so this agar jelly was placed here for 2 hours. Okay. Now I just have to put the questions onto another slide so that we can see them clearly. Okay, so state why the apical bud was placed on a block of agar jelly for 2 hours. So why did they put this agar jelly? What is agar jelly? Does anybody know? It's just like normal petroleum jelly, but it's a bit harder, and it has a whole lot of dissolved nutrients and minerals in it, and even hormones. Okay, it can have hormones in it. So why was that placed on top of that cut stem for 2 hours? So that it can actually acclimatize. Okay, so that the plant hormones or the auxins from the apical tip could diffuse into the block of agar jelly. Okay. Then describe the results obtained for pot plant 1. What happened in pot plant 1? What can you see here? You have the formation of lateral branches. Okay, so lateral branches actually grew in pot plant 1 compared to, there's nothing growing laterally here in pot plant 2. Okay, so that is what we observed for pot plant 1. The stem stopped growing upwards and we had the formation of lateral branches. Okay. Explain how fruit farmers can use this knowledge from the results that you've just stated to their benefit. So what is the purpose of these lateral branches? Why is that a good thing, and how can farmers use it? Okay, so if lateral branches develop, it means that more fruit can be produced because more fruit can hang off those lateral branches. Okay, think of a grapevine. If lots of branches are formed, then you're going to get more grapes, so a bigger yield of fruit. Or you can say if there's shorter trees, then they're going to make lateral branches actually lower, so you wouldn't need to get up on a ladder and try and get the fruit off the tree. The plant will be shorter and wider. Okay, so there'll be a development of those lateral branches, that actually make the tree wider. So it makes harvesting of the fruit much easier. Okay. Then explain why the stem in pot plant 2 grew upwards. So why do we actually have this pot plant 2 growing upwards? because the auxins in the block of agar jelly actually move downwards into the stem, causing cell elongation. Okay, and if you put auxins on the tip of a stem, it's going to promote cell elongation and cellular division. So that means that stem is actually going to continue to grow, and it's going to grow towards the light. So it's going to grow upwards. So the auxins in this agar jelly will actually promote growth in an upwards direction. Okay, whereas the petroleum jelly actually inhibited that growth. It inhibited that vertical growth, but it promoted, because those auxins were concentrated lower down on the stem, it promoted that lateral branch growth. Okay, so auxins in the block of agar jelly move downward into the stem, causing cell elongation and growth, resulting in upward growth of the entire stem. Okay, is that was for 3 marks, by the way. So is that understandable? Does anybody have any questions on that particular thing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so plant responses to the environment is actually not so, it's not a big section, but try and make sure you get your marks for that. Okay. I did see a question in the chat.
I'm Jerusha.
Yes.
It was a student by the name of Brandon. He had a question with regards to homeostasis. However, he's no longer online. I think he has some network issues. So if anyone else maybe has a question based on homeostasis, they could ask you now.
Sure.
He just didn't give me his exact question for homeostasis.
Okay, I didn't want to go through that anyway, because it's definitely an important concept that you must know, students. You need to know about homeostasis in relation to what happens in terms of blood glucose levels, in terms of water levels, salt levels, thyroxine levels. Okay, so negative feedback systems and homeostasis is very important. In fact, I was supposed to draw your attention as well to a negative feedback system that is even in human reproduction. And that would be when you have your follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Okay, so in human reproduction, the follicle stimulating hormone promotes meiosis and the formation of an ovarian follicle in the ovary. So this matures into a Graafian follicle, as we discussed. And during ovulation, the Graafian follicle bursts to release an egg into the fallopian tube. The rest of the Graafian follicle forms a corpus luteum, which, under the influence of luteinizing hormone, then secretes progesterone. And that causes the endometrium of the uterus to become thick in preparation for implantation of that fertilized follicle. Progesterone inhibits the pituitary gland from secreting more follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so this is an example of a negative feedback where luteinizing hormone will actually cause a reaction, and that reaction, or whatever it causes, will now inhibit another thing. Okay, so when we have more luteinizing hormone, we have the corpus luteum, and that produces progesterone. Progesterone will inhibit follicle stimulating hormone. So we don't get another follicle being produced because there is implantation. You've got a baby in the womb, so you don't need to make another egg. That's what it's telling the body. Okay, so that negative feedback system, that concept of negative feedback system is very important and will definitely come out in your paper somewhere. Okay, so if we have to quickly go over that, let's talk about a negative feedback system in terms of, for example, thyroxine. Okay, thyroxine, if your body has normal levels of thyroxine, and then all of a sudden it rises above normal, the pituitary gland will secrete, will detect that there's this increase in thyroxine levels, okay? And then it will actually stop secreting thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? Remember, the TSH is going to stimulate the thyroid to produce thyroxine. So if there's already too much thyroxine in the body, you don't want your thyroid to keep producing more and more and more, okay? Because there's already a high level. So the pituitary gland will detect that there's a high level of thyroxine. It will then stop making thyroid stimulating hormone. And that means that the thyroid will not be stimulated to produce thyroxine. Therefore, your thyroxine has a chance to now, the levels can actually drop, and that will return the thyroxine levels to normal in the blood. The opposite can also occur. If you have low thyroxine levels, what's going to happen? The pituitary gland is going to detect that, and it's going to start producing more thyroid stimulating hormone, which means the thyroid is going to get stimulated much more, and it's going to produce more thyroxine, which will again normalize the amount of thyroxine in the blood in an event that it was low to begin with. Okay, do you understand that? Do you have a question, or anybody has a question on that negative feedback system? As I do another example with blood glucose levels, let's say, okay, or it's definitely something that can come out in the paper. Okay, so let's say you have high blood glucose levels, okay? When your blood glucose levels rise above normal, the pancreas will detect this, okay? And what will it cause? It will cause the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas to secrete the hormone insulin. So what does insulin do? Insulin will convert that excess glucose that's in the blood. It will convert it to glycogen, and glycogen will then be stored in the muscle cells. So it is decreasing that amount of glucose in the blood. Okay, so this happens when your glucose levels are too high in the blood. So insulin will actually promote the entry of glycogen into the muscle cells to store that glucose. If your glucose levels are too low, the pancreas is going to detect it again, and then your alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans are going to secrete the hormone glucagon. Glucagon actually converts glycogen to glucose. So it converts the glycogen that's stored in the muscles into glucose, which is then released into the bloodstream, which brings up your blood glucose levels. Okay, are you with me? Are you okay with that?
Yes, miss. Yes,
okay.
miss.
Okay, very good. Okay, so the same feedback system will apply to your water levels, for example, and your salt levels even. Okay, with salt, it's affecting the kidneys. Okay, so it will cause, so if your salt levels are too high, it will cause the your renal tubules to become more permeable to water. So more water will be reabsorbed into your body, and you will have concentrated urine. Okay. So that would be a negative feedback system in regards to salt and water. Okay.
The other possible questions in the chat is to just briefly discuss thermoregulation or the different layers of the skin.
Okay, fantastic. And I actually wanted to do that because We didn't do the structure of the skin in the previous one. Okay, so they asked for structure of the skin. Different layers of the skin, you said.
Yes, the different layers of the skin.
Okay, so your first outermost layer of the skin, that is called your epidermis. Okay, so your epidermis has 4 layers. Okay, it's made up of 4 layers. The horny layer, which is made up of dead cells. Then underneath that, you've got a non-granular layer. Underneath that, you've got a granular layer. And then you have a Malpighian layer. And that is actually what contains your pigments or the melanin that gives color to your skin. Okay, then below the Malpighian layer, below those 4 layers of the epidermis, then you have the dermis, and that is 1 layer and it's extremely thick. Okay, and that dermis now contains all of your connective tissue, your collagen fibers, all of that. Okay, your blood vessels, hair follicles, nerves. Okay, and it is very strong and stretchy and holds that whole skin organ together. Okay, so you can see in this diagram that the dermis is much thicker than the epidermis, but the epidermis is made up of those 4 different layers. Okay, so the follicles of hairs and everything are contained in that dermal layer. Okay, and below the dermis, you'll see a subcutaneous fatty layer. Okay, that's where your insulation comes into play. Okay, so below that dermal layer is your insulating fatty tissue layer. Okay. So the outermost layer of your skin is the horny layer, which has lots of flat dead cells. And it actually also contains keratin, which waterproofs and protects the skin. Okay, so you should know the function of each of these labels as well. Okay, because they can easily give you a diagram from this. Okay, I've also seen a diagram where in one of the papers, it gave you a sweat gland in the skin, showed you a sweat gland in the skin, and it asked you, it was asking actually about thermoregulation. So if you lose too much water from sweat, what is that negative feedback system? Okay, so there'll be obviously a negative feedback system in relation to water and salt. Okay. So if you're sweating too much from your sweat glands in your skin, your body will actually be losing water. Okay, so if it's losing water, that means your brain needs to detect that. Okay, your hypothalamus will actually detect that. Okay, it detects the fluctuations in water levels, okay, in the blood, and it stops releasing ADH into the blood, which is antidiuretic hormone. Okay, and when there's a decrease in antidiuretic hormone, the tubules in the kidney become less permeable to water, which means that your body is going to hold that water more because you're losing so much of it from the sweat. Okay, so that means less water will leave the tubules and more water is, what am I saying? More water is actually going to be maintained in the body because you're losing too much from sweat. So the kidneys will actually become more permeable to water and actually reabsorb that water that's passing through the kidney. Okay. So you can have an integrated type of question where you get a diagram of the skin, but you're asked about negative feedback. Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Yes, Miss, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
None in the chat, so anyone you can unmute your mic and also ask a
Yes,
question.
please feel free. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm happy to take any more questions. Oh, I have one more slide, I guess, just for some tips. Okay. For this particular section was to know the role and the function of each of the hormones. Okay, then that also extends to your endocrine hormones. Okay, so your testosterone, your estrogen, your progesterone, even your thyroxine, all of your hormones, adrenaline, luteinizing hormone, all hormones know where they are produced and know the function of each of them. Okay, and then you must be able to explain all the cycles in reproduction. For example, the ovarian cycle, the menstrual cycle, oogenesis, spermatogenesis, all those cycles or production pathways you need to be able to explain. Okay, for approximately 3 to 5 marks. Okay, and that obviously includes noting which hormones are at play. Okay, you need to know which hormones are involved and you must mention them. Okay, for example, in oogenesis, you know that in response to luteinizing hormone, that is when your corpus luteum is going to that is when your corpus luteum is going to actually start your luteinizing hormone influences your Graafian follicle to burst and release that ovum, causing ovulation. Okay, so that hormone comes into play in the ovarian cycle. So you must know hormones in relation to cycles. Okay, so you have to be able to explain that very well. Okay, then another point is you must remember your scientific method. So you saw we had a question about an actual experiment, and you'll definitely get quite a few of those where you have to explain an experiment. Okay, so you must know what's a dependent variable, what's an independent variable, what are factors that must be controlled in an experiment. Okay, and then be able to read the results of an experiment. Okay, so please remember your scientific method. You must know what is a control, what are controlled variables, how do we increase the reliability of an experiment. Okay, please, you must revise that because you are definitely going to get an experiment that you need to answer questions on. Okay, and the last one was negative feedback systems, which we just went over. And I'd like to wish you all everything of the best for tomorrow. Our thoughts are with you. I'm sure it's going to be very, very good. We're aiming for 90. So all the best to you all. Okay.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you very much for your time. And good luck.
Please remember to fill the register, and I posted the video links as well for these.
Part of the UKZN experience is the opportunity to be part of a community and to network with not only our world-renowned academics, but with future game changers and leaders. They do say that the extent of one's success can be attributed to those they rub shoulders with. Therefore, you must surround yourself with like-minded people. So, how do you become part of a community that is committed to your self-development? How do you become part of UKZN? First, you have to apply.
All applications for undergraduate studies at UKZN are processed through the Central Applications Office, CAO. This is for both your course and student residence application. The application process is as follows. Step 1. Consult the CAO handbook. This handbook provides a list of all qualifications available at UKZN. Step 2. Have a look through the various courses offered and choose a program that interests you and for which you meet the minimum requirements. As one of the top 5 universities in the country, UKZN promotes academic excellence. So meeting the minimum requirements does not guarantee you a place to study. Step 3. find the program code linked to your chosen qualification. This is the code you need to enter in your application form. Okay, let me show you something. You see, a code has 3 parts. Example, for BCom in accounting, the code is KN-P-BCN or KN-W-BCN. Crazy code, right? Well, basically, the KN stands for UKZN, the middle part stands for the campus of your choice, P for Pietermaritzburg, W for Westville. Then BCN stands for the actual course. Make sure to get these codes right. Step 4. Use this program code when completing your CAO form, which is available from the CAO website. Your application will be sent to UKZN. You can always check the status of your application using your CAO number, ID number, or passport number on this website, www.caocheck.ukzn.ac.za. For more information, visit www.cao.ac.za.
It's that easy. Pay close attention to closing dates for qualifications. For example, MBCHB closes on the 30th of June, whilst other undergraduate programs close on the 30th of September. What are you waiting for? Apply now and shape your future today.